The first Legend of Zelda game was released in 1986 for the Famicom Disk System and later released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1987 for the US and Europe. The story follows a boy named Link, who is tasked with finding the 8 Triforce shards and rebuilding the Triforce, all before saving the Princess of Hyrule Zelda, defeating the evil Prince of Darkness Ganon in the process, and finally bringing peace to the Kingdom of Hyrule, and was a smash hit, starting a decade-spanning gaming franchise. Although at its core I would say The Legend of Zelda is a quintessential Japanese story, it was heavily based on medieval European tales and myth, particularly Welsh Celtic folklore, like King Arthur with the Master Sword basically just being the sword in the stone, and Link's horse Epona being named after the Celtic goddess of fertility. And as a Welsh lad, I approve of this. I may also be half English, but they have been taking credit for our cool lore for way too long now. All of this was originally inspired by the childhood adventures of series creator Shigeru Miyamoto in the countryside of Sonobo, Japan. And after seeing some pictures of Sonobo, I really fucked up growing in the UK. But anyway, as a boy Shigeru would venture deep into the forests near his home, leading him to rural villages straight from feudal Japan. Untouched lakes and caves surrounded by dense forest and wildlife. Years later, Miyamoto wanted to recreate this in gaming and bring to life a miniature garden for players to explore in. And I think this pure intention to bring that feeling of exploration and childlike wonder to life is what has helped this franchise stay so popular over the decades. Okay, so my experience with The Legend of Zelda isn't actually the most expansive. I played half of the Breath of the Wild on my mate's Switch when I lived with my friends, and before I was exiled to my dad's spare room. I got halfway through the Twilight Princess HD before just kind of dropping it. And I tried to play Ocarina of Time a few times from the 3DS version, emulators on my computer, and the Wii U port, but always lost the will early on. Although I will go back and complete Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild at some point, because I do remember actually liking those games, there is only one Zelda game I have actually fully completed. Not just once, but twice. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. And I'm somebody who gets bored of stuff easily, so I think it speaks volumes to the quality of this game. But if I had to really find a word to sum up this game in my head, going back to Miyamoto and his picturesque sounding childhood, it would have to be adventure. And in my opinion, Wind Waker fully embodies the essence of adventure in a way no other game in the series has. Is Wind Waker peak Zelda?
GameCube. Game でしか味わえない感動がある。任天堂ゲームキューブ、ゼルダの伝説、風のパクト。
The Wind Waker was released on the 13th of December 2002 for Japan, the 24th of March 2003 in North America, and on the 2nd of May 2003 in Europe for the GameCube, and released to immediate widespread critical acclaim, winning the 2002 Game Critics Awards for Best Console Game, the 2004 BAFTA Game Awards for Best Adventure Game, the 2004 Developers' Choice Awards for Excellence in Visual Arts, and the 2004 Academy of Interactive Arts and Science USA Outstanding Achievement in Art Direction Award, all while being nominated for another 16 awards, so it did very well. Nintendo went for a cel-shaded and less serious approach to the look and art style, which did divide the fans, as many were hoping for a game that built upon the dark and edgy art style and feel of Ocarina and Majora's Mask. This was worsened by the GameCube Zelda demo premiered at the Nintendo Space World in 2000 that presented a short clip of Ganon and Link fighting that was pretty much just Ocarina with more modern GameCube graphics. So I kind of get why you would be a bit let down if you got hyped for that game to then get Wind Waker. The reason for this bait and switch was because the team behind Zelda, led by Eiji Aonuma, had only just finished Majora's Mask in 2000, and then had to create the clip to help promote the GameCube before they even began creating the game. And soon after realised they were completely burnt out on the style, format, and the ideas that came along with it, deciding to push the boat out and go in a different direction, leading to the cel-shaded, more cartoony design. This aesthetic allowed them to do things that would take a lot longer to create in a more realistic style. Like the whole game being set across different little islands on the Great Sea is something that would have been very hard to create in my opinion, and would have just looked bland and forgettable with the Twilight Princess's aesthetic, or even the more modern games like the Breath of the Wild. And you gotta admit, the crystal blue sea really pops with the cel-shaded style. However, if you weren't fussed, then you are not alone, as producers and original creators Tezuka and Miyamoto were none too pleased about the design. Although in the end they backed their team and went along with the decisions of the game's director Eiji Aonuma. While there was some controversy surrounding the design, over the years those edges have been smoothed to round stones, as in 2013 Nintendo released the Wind Waker HD for the Wii U. Miyamoto still took some convincing, but ultimately once again backed the lads. Damn, this Miyamoto fella seems like a cool guy. The Wind Waker HD was a great success, getting a stellar Metacritic score of 90 out of 100, prompting Nintendo to release The Legend of Zelda The Twilight Princess HD on the 4th of March 2016. Wind Waker's cel-shaded design translated really well to the HD upscale, and the devs introduced some new features like Swift Sail to make sailing faster and less repetitive, with improvements to the Picto Box, the Triforce quest, Tingle questline, as well as introducing features to take advantage of the Wii U tablet and gyroscope features were added, although you could just play the game with a Pro Controller to avoid the tablet and gyroscope stuff. The game's honestly amazing soundtrack also received updates to improve its quality. This is the version I am familiar with, as well as the version of the game all the footage shown today will be from, and I think I've rambled out everything I can relating to the game's development.
For a limited time, buy the Nintendo GameCube for $149.95 and receive the Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, one of 3 great games, free.
So before getting into the story of The Wind Waker, we need to address the timeline. Although Breath of the Wild has apparently fucked it up by referencing events from all 3 of the timelines, begging the question of what games could be considered myth and what games actually happened. Nonetheless, the timeline is as follows. Everything starts with Skyward Sword and the creation of Hyrule, and then we have Minish Cap and 4 Swords into Ocarina of Time. Now, from here is where the timeline splits into 3. To the left, we have the timeline where Link loses to Ganondorf at the end of Ocarina. This is the timeline that all the original Zelda games take place within, and is the darkest timeline. In the middle, we have the timeline branching out from the child ending of Ocarina. Ganondorf is defeated and Link is warped back in time to being a child, but with the memories of what happened before, warning young Zelda and getting Ganondorf sent for execution. And from this ending, Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, and 4 Swords Adventures takes place. So this is basically the edgy eyeshadow timeline. The last timeline to the right branches out from the 3rd ending of Ocarina of Time. This time, Link defeats Ganondorf by sealing him away in the sacred realm of Hyrule, and Link gets warped back, but Zelda stays in the future timeline, helping to rebuild Hyrule. Wind Waker takes place in this timeline. Well, I think you know how this is going to go. Eventually, Ganondorf breaks free of the Sacred Realm, but this time the Hero of Time isn't around to save the day. Ganon swept through the kingdom in his search for the Triforce, leaving the people of Hyrule with no other choice than to pray to the gods. And the gods answered, instructing the faithful to flee for the highest mountaintops. In a last act to stop Ganon, the gods flooded the land, sealing Hyrule along with Ganon and his army at the bottom of the sea in an enchanted chamber where time stood frozen. Over the ages, the legend of Hyrule became mere myth, as those who survived the flood learned to sail the Great Sea and spread out to the many small mountain peaks that now stood as islands on a bright blue planet. Now, welcome to Outset Island. It's the birthday of a lad named Link. or test. I didn't intend to play this safe through, but either way. His nan gives him the green tunic of the hero that you get when you come of age, and his sister lets him use her telescope. Using it, Link spots the Halmarok King soaring in the sky with a girl caught in its claws and a pirate ship in hot pursuit trying to shoot the bird down with a cannon. One of these cannon shots forces the bird to drop the girl in a forest at the peak of Outset Island. Link procures a sword and gets to the forest, saving the girl, who reveals her name to be Tetra, the captain of the pirate ship. Leading Tetra to her crew, the bird gets confused and kidnaps Link's sister, thinking she's Tetra. Then, a bird postman shows up to tell the two of rumours spreading of a large bird who kidnaps young girls and takes them to the Forsaken Fortress. Now at the Forsaken Fortress, Link, with the help of Tetra, is able to sneak into the fortress and make it to his sister's cell. But under the command of a strange ginger figure, the bird from before throws Link into the sea. Link is saved from the sea by a red talking boat called the King of Red Lions, and he reveals the ginger figure to be Ganon, who has escaped from the bottom of the sea, further explaining that the power to defeat Ganon is held within the Master Sword, but Link must complete 3 trials to access this power. And that trial is to find the 3 Goddess Pearls, Din's Pearl, Pharaoh's Pearl, and Nehru's Pearl. Once obtained, Link places each pearl on the 3 statues spread across the Triangle Islands, opening the Tower of the Gods. Link makes his way through the tower and gets to the top, defeating the Tower Guardian, Godan, who reminds me of the boss from Smash Bros. But either way, once he's done, you get to the tip top of the tower and ring a bell, opening a portal down below. This portal takes Link and the King of Red Lions to Hyrule Castle, frozen in time, leading him to the Master Sword. Link takes the sword, restoring the flow of time to Hyrule, and heads to the Forsaken Fortress, defeating the Halmarok King while Tetra and the crew save Link's sister. Link has a go at Ganon again, but gets easily dealt with on account of the Master Sword losing much of its power. Luckily though, the lads come through and save the group. The King of Red Lions takes Link and Tetra back to Hyrule, revealing himself to be King Daphnis Nonsen Hyrule, and Tetra is revealed to be Zelda, who decides to chill in Hyrule while Link and Daphnis head out to awaken the 2 new sages to give the Master Sword its power, the Korok Maker and Rito Medley, taking them through the Wind and Earth temples, restoring the Master Sword. Now, the last thing Link needs to have the power to face Ganon is the Triforce of Courage, tracking down the 8 shards scattered amongst the Great Sea and finally being recognised as the hero of the winds by the gods. But this wouldn't be the Legend of Zelda if Ganon didn't kidnap the princess. So, Link ventures to Ganon's tower, defeating his minions and puppet monsters. Link, with the help of Zelda, battles Ganon and plants the Master Sword in his forehead, turning him into stone and bringing peace to the Great Sea. The end. Oof. Let me know if you even like me telling the game's story, because it feels like I'm missing a lot still, and that was easily 1,000 words or so. But to wrap this section up, I love this game's story, and it truly resonated with me in a way no other Zelda game has. I think the design of Link makes him a lot more relatable and expressive, so his journey and coming of age feels really genuine and not just like you're getting to the next level. Having the game start with his sister getting kidnapped and having to promise his sweet old nan that he will save her adds this emotional attachment and motivation, and Link getting thrown into a quest he doesn't really want or feel capable of makes his achievements later feel really earned. Link doesn't want to be the hero of the winds, nor even explore the Great Sea. He seemed more than happy living his life a day at a time on Outset Island, and that's why his hero's journey really hits. Now, the gameplay is simply brilliant. Set in the open world of the Great Sea, you sail on the King of Red Lions to move around between islands. And as mentioned earlier, in the HD version, you can buy the quick sail in an auction on Windfall Island. This is essential, and I would recommend getting it as early as you can. It makes sailing a lot faster, and you don't need to use Wind's Requiem constantly to change wind direction. And just this small addition actually makes the sailing kind of relaxing when combined with the visuals and music of the game. You can also fire cannons and scavenge for treasures from the safety of your boat. The combat system is the same as every other 3D Zelda game and works as it should. If it ain't broken, then don't fix it as far as I'm concerned. Although, the first person aiming for the bow and arrow is the most infuriating shit ever. But whatever. Lock on, block strikes, and use items. Speaking of, you usually get items and upgrades as you work your way through puzzles and dungeons, with you usually needing that item to progress through the game. Very classic Metroidvania, and I love it. It just makes games with it so satisfying and creates this build up to the end of the game. This is something I think the more modern open-world RPGs are sometimes missing these days. Dungeons in this game are also great and form-fitting for any self-respecting Zelda game, full of puzzles, enemies, and bosses. Now, I will admit that on my second playthrough, the boss battles and puzzles were pretty easy, and I've never been the sharpest tool in the shed, but it does get harder as the game goes on. Originally, there was going to be another 2 dungeons, but unfortunately Nintendo couldn't get these completed in time and had to use collecting the Triforce shards to make up for it, which could explain why the first 2 dungeons were pretty easy, as it would have built up more naturally if they had the other 2 dungeons included. This leads me to the dreaded Triforce quest. This is easily the worst part of the game, because it is a lot of go here, get a map, go there, do this annoying little puzzle, get a Triforce piece, Google what to do next. It's tedious, and I hated it, especially because I didn't update my map or get the Ballad of the Gales, so maybe that's my fault. But either way, this part of the game is really long-winded and breaks up the entire flow. The game ends in Ganon's tower, and it's an amalgamation of all the boss battles and dungeons throughout the game. And this is just hard enough to be slightly annoying, which I think is essential for that end-of-game dopamine rush. Oh, also, if you are perhaps not playing the game on a Nintendo Wii U, then just make sure you have all your buttons mapped correctly so you can actually block during the Ganon fight. You will thank me later. This has been a long one, so I'll keep my conclusion brief, and in all honesty, I don't have much else to say. I love this game. The art style is beautiful, characters like Ganon look amazing and full of character, and considering how kind of bland Ganon looks in most games, I think this serves as an example of why the cel-shaded style rules. I guess it would be nice to see how an adult Link and Zelda would look in the cel-shaded style, but I digress. The music is warm and has this hopeful, adventurous feeling to it. I could lay back and fall asleep to this, but in a good way. The combat, dungeons, puzzles, and bosses may not push the envelope, but in all honesty, no game has since Ocarina. Each game builds upon the next and adds their own unique flair, which is part of the reason why so many love this franchise. Whether you love the colourful optimism of the Wind Waker, or the dark, edgy style of the Twilight Princess, or even if you aren't into 3D games, there is truly something for everyone. I guess in the end, as fans, we are passionate about our favourite Zelda games, and this can lead us to become tribal and competitive with each other, but it doesn't have to be this way. We as fans can come together and celebrate the franchise we love. You see this issue in nearly every fandom today, and it has to stop, or all the media we love will be torn apart from the inside. Zelda is a franchise built on wonder, optimism, and, as Shigeru Miyamoto would say, adventure.